Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. Let's take a look at aggregate supply. And this is just a really short video on the introduction and overview of what it means. Because there's two difficult things and new things. They're not difficult, you just got to wrap your minds around them. Is that in aggregate supply, there's two different concepts. Number one, short run aggregate supply and long run aggregate supply. We got to get our minds around that. And the second thing we got to get our minds around is different views of what the long run looks like. There's the neoclassical viewpoint, and there is the Keynesian viewpoint. And understanding the difference between those is also critical to understanding aggregate supply. But first, let's look at the short run, long run aspect of this concept. First of all, understand that aggregate supply is the total amount of goods and services that all industries in the economy will produce at every given price level in a particular time frame. So that's pretty straightforward. And that means that it's essentially the sum of all microeconomic supply curves of all the industries in the economy, right? So you add up all of the microeconomic supply curves, and you're going to get an aggregate supply curve. And in the short run, that's going to look very much like the microeconomic supply curve, and that there's a positive relationship, right, between the price level and the amount of output. But in the long run, it's going to look a little bit different. And the easiest way to think about the difference between the short run and the long run is that in the long run, the easiest way to think about it for now is that in the long run, there is a set amount of capacity in the economy, which means that there's only so many people, so many industries, so much, the quantity of things that that an economy can produce is set. That's the idea. And what that means is that if you added up the total capacity of all factories, all everything, in the long run, that's the maximum that it could do. Okay? So if every single pizza oven in Chile is functioning right now, then they're working at full capacity, and that means they would be meeting the long run capacity. Okay. But if there is just one pizza oven not working, or more likely hundreds of pizza ovens in Chile not working, then in the short run, it's where the economy is functioning right now. Okay, and have these two ideas divided out. The short run is sort of what's happening right now, and the long run in the aggregate supply model means that in the long run, there's a set capacity in an economy, and that is based on the quantity and the quality of factors of production. Okay, so we got a lot of new ideas here that you got to kind of get in your mind, okay? But you think about the long run is fixed and the short run is where the economy is functioning right now. And maybe in the short run, it's possible that the economy functions beyond the long run capacity, but in the long, but only for a short period of time. And what we're going to see is that the long run capacity is the max that is sustainable. And what does that mean? Think about it in terms of your studies. Like as you head towards semester exams, let's say, you're actually functioning beyond what is sustainable, right? You only have certain amount of capacity in your life. And you, as you're studying for finals exam, you are sacrificing other parts of your life, maybe your social life, your family life, something. But but in the long run, you're gonna have to ramp back. You can't you don't actually have enough long run capacity to both spend the amount of hours and time that you need in studying for semester exam and maintain the other parts of your life. Okay, so in the long run, it's not sustainable beyond the normal capacity of your life. Better so, where we live is in the short run, okay? And in the short run, you might be able to go beyond long run, but not really. You're going to get slapped back down, and you're going to run out of energy. You're going to get overtired. You're going to break down. You're going to have a stress overload of stress, right? So the short run is where the economy is actually functioning right now. And if you're not in final exams, then that's where you're functioning, right? Probably not at your max capacity. You could probably spend more time doing schoolwork than you are. You're not at max capacity, but it's maybe something that's more real, something that's happening right now. Okay, so that's just sort of an idea that to plan in your head. And as we get into a deeper understanding of long run and short run aggregate supply, that might serve you well. So the last thing I want to do in this little video is talk about two schools of thought that affect aggregate supply. The first one is the Neoclassical Style. And those neoclassical economists include a number of different branches of economists that you might have heard these before, including monetarists, supply side economists, and economists from the quote Austrian school. And what these economists have in common is their belief, listen to this closely, in the efficiency of market forces and the view that there should be the minimum of government intervention in the allocation of resources in the economy. Okay? So and another layer to put in there, and you don't have to have a full understanding of this right now, it'll come, is that the neoclassicals believe in the long run aggregate supply curve is perfectly inelastic. And if you think about what that means, it's perfectly inelastic, it's perfectly vertical. And that means that there's only so many people, so many factors of production, so much that a country can produce. And maybe for a country like Chile, which only has 17 million people, it would be here. And for a country like the United States, which has 300 million, that capacity would be out here. But at some point, Chile is going to come up to their maximum capacity for the efficiency and the quantity and the quality of their factors of production, and every country would have that. And what that would mean is that no matter what the price level, that's it. So it's going to be perfectly inelastic. Okay, so that's the neoclassical sort of really hardcore Adam Smith style economist, where there's a very minimum amount of government intervention in the allocation of the resources. Okay, that's the neoclassical view. Just let that sit in your mind. Don't worry about mastery. Just know that there's that position. Okay. Then the other view is the Keynesian view, and that's pronounced Keynesian. John Maynard Keynes was an English economist during the Great Depression. This is post-industrial revolution, and therefore industrialized nations had already created this spare capacity that was already built into their economy. And I like to think about this, I don't know why I think about this, but Pizza Hut, right? What they're saying is that during the Great Depression, what Keynes said was that during the Great Depression, what this says is that if at the maximum level of the long run aggregate supply curve, this only exists like this, maximum capacity. But what he said is that, okay, there's that section of the curve, but there are other sections of the curve that exist. And if you had once been operating out here, say England, pre-World War I, and then all of a sudden demand drops tremendously, and you got a picture of aggregate demand curve coming down here. Just let this go through your mind and hang with me here. If there's an aggregate demand curve coming down right here, right? What that would mean, right there, okay? What this would mean is that there is extra capacity in the system. These are Pizza Hut ovens. Of course, Pizza Hut wasn't around in England in the 1920s, but these are Pizza Hut ovens that are not being used. And so as the economy, as demand starts to recover, guess what? Price levels aren't going to go up. Price levels are actually going to stay flat until this demand curve reaches a point where there's actually going to be new factors of production that are going to have to be employed in order to meet that demand. But along this section of the curve, that's not the case, Keynes said. And then as you get out here, then all those pizza ovens and all of that spare capacity that wasn't being used during the Great Depression, right? It had existed before, but during the Great Depression wasn't used, starts to be full. And so as demand, these red lines are aggregate demand curves here, and as demand ends up getting to this portion, then it's going to be inelastic, which is analogous to this here. But this is true for industrialized nations. I always think of it as, this is the assumption that at one point all of this stuff was used, but there's been a Great Depression and it's been pushed back this way. Okay? So those are the two views, the Keynesian view and the neoclassical view. If you don't have a full understanding of them right now, don't worry. Just allow yourself to get that layer in your head, and that's how you got to go after economics anyway. You got to let these layers build up, and then all of a sudden you have this moment where the light goes on, and you see this flash in your face. And this is why I love teaching economics, because it happens to every student, no matter what level they're at. They all of a sudden go, oh, yeah, I got it. But that's an accumulation of layers upon layers upon layers. All right, so here's your introduction to aggregate supply. It's super fascinating. It's about to get really complicated, but you're ready for it. So good luck, and I'll talk to you in a bit.